Black maid humiliated at the bank. But the Mafia boss was there. Maria Jackson walked into the First National Bank, carrying with her the weight of a long day's work. As a maid, she had spent years cleaning wealthy homes, catering to people who never looked her in the eye. She had learned to stay invisible, to be unnoticed, to be silent. But today was different. As she stepped into the marble-floored bank, she felt the eyes of the room on her. The crisp suits, the gold jewelry, the faint scent of expensive cologne in the air. It was all a stark contrast to her worn dress and scuffed shoes. Maria needed to deposit some money, her hard-earned savings from cleaning houses, to pay for her rent. She had saved up enough to cover the bills, and this was her chance to finally take a breath. But as she approached the counter, something shifted in the air. Tim Collins, the young teller at the counter, looked her up and down. His eyes narrowed in judgment. "Cash," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You must be joking. Do you have any idea how much paperwork this requires?" Maria felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She tried to explain, but Tim cut her off, speaking louder now, almost theatrically. "I see here your occupation is a maid. How do you expect to manage a deposit this large with cash?" The whispers started. Other customers in the line began to look, some shaking their heads, others muttering under their breath. Maria felt small, exposed, humiliated. She had done nothing wrong. She had earned every penny with her sweat and hard work. But in this space, she was nothing more than a poor maid, dismissed without a second thought. Tim continued, his voice growing louder. "This is highly irregular. Are you sure this money is legitimate? Maybe you're involved in something you don't understand." The words cut deep. Maria opened her mouth to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat. She wanted to shout back, to tell them all the truth, but fear held her back. She was just a maid, after all. Then, as if from nowhere, a shadow appeared. Johnny Russo, the notorious Mafia boss, stepped into the bank. He was dressed in a tailored suit that could have cost more than Maria's entire apartment. He moved with an effortless confidence, the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Maria, he paused. He had been watching from the entrance, his gaze sharp, assessing. Tim was still ranting at Maria, oblivious to the new presence in the room. Johnny took a few steps forward, his cold blue eyes locking with Tim's. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable weight. Tim, startled by the sudden shift in energy, stammered. "Sir, this woman, she's making a cash deposit," and Johnny interrupted him with a raised hand. "I don't think I asked for your opinion," he said, his voice ice cold. "You will process this deposit immediately, and you will apologize." Tim's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but Johnny's gaze silenced him. Slowly, Tim nodded, scrambling to make the necessary arrangements. Maria stood frozen, too shocked to move. She had never imagined something like this would happen. Johnny turned to her, his expression softening for the first time. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Maria nodded, though she could hardly believe it. In that moment, everything changed. The humiliation she had felt only moments before began to melt away, replaced by a feeling she had never known: respect. Johnny's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. Then he turned and walked out of the bank, his presence leaving an indelible mark on the room. Maria followed him with her gaze, still processing what had just happened. She had been saved, not by someone who owed her anything, but by someone who saw her for what she truly was. A person, not just a maid. The tension in the room lifted, and the whispers faded away. Tim stood there, still recovering from his shock, while Maria finally, quietly, made her deposit. She couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. For the first time in a long time, someone had treated her with dignity. Maria stood frozen for a moment, the world around her still buzzing with the energy of the bank, but all she could hear was the echo of Johnny Russo's voice, cool and commanding, cutting through the chaos. The deposit was made. The humiliation she had felt only moments ago was slowly fading away, replaced by something she couldn't quite place: respect, perhaps, something she had never known in this kind of place. As she turned to leave the bank, she felt the weight of her steps shift, like the world had slightly tilted, and she was standing straighter than before. She wasn't sure what had just happened. Johnny Russo, the Mafia boss, had come out of nowhere to protect her, And now she was walking away from that encounter, a sense of power coursing through her veins. She had never been treated like this, especially not in a place like this. The door of the bank swung open, and she stepped outside into the bright afternoon light. The noise of the city greeted her with its usual vigor, but there was something different about it today. She felt like she had just stepped into a new reality. Just then, she saw Johnny's black car pull up across the street. He had parked his car just in front of the building, and his presence still loomed large, even from a distance. Maria hesitated for a second. She had no idea what to do next. She didn't even know what to make of the situation. She had been saved, but by whom? The Mafia boss? She couldn't shake off the feeling that this was the kind of encounter that changed the course of your life. Johnny Russo was dangerous. She knew that much, but the way he had stepped in to defend her without hesitation made her wonder if there was more to him than the stories told. As she walked toward the subway station, her mind raced with questions. Why had he helped her? Was it a mistake? Or did he see something in her that no one else had? She shook her head, trying to focus. She had a job to do. She had to go back to the house she worked at. The quiet was always a relief after the chaos of the outside world. The weight of the day, the overwhelming rush of emotions, made her feel more exhausted than usual. Maria was used to being invisible, to slipping into the background, but that had just changed. She had been seen. For the first time in a long time, someone had looked at her and treated her like she mattered. As she entered the subway, she felt her phone buzz in her pocket. It was a message from her best friend, Rosa. She pulled it out and read, "You won't believe what happened today? Guess who walked into the bank?" Maria froze. The message was brief, but the shock hit her like a wave. Rosa had no idea what had just transpired. Maria quickly typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. "You won't believe it either. The Mafia boss was there. He helped me." She hit send and stared at the screen. She wasn't sure what she expected Rosa to say. Maria didn't know what to think herself. The subway ride was longer than usual. She stared at her reflection in the window as the train moved through the dark tunnels. She barely recognized the person staring back at her. A woman who had just been humiliated, yes, but who had also been seen for the first time. It wasn't long before Maria arrived at her stop and walked to the small apartment she called home. She stepped inside, trying to shake off the weight of the day. But the moment she closed the door behind her, something shifted again. She couldn't stop thinking about Johnny Russo. Why had he done it? Was there something else behind his actions? And what would happen next? The thought gnawed at her, but she forced herself to focus. She needed to make dinner for the family she worked for. She needed to keep moving forward, even if the world around her had changed. But deep inside, she knew that she couldn't go back to the way things had been. The encounter at the bank had opened a door, and now there was no turning back. Maria walked into the small apartment she called home, the door clicking shut behind her with a soft echo. The familiar smell of the place, stale coffee and dust, felt oddly comforting after the events of the day. She kicked off her shoes, the tiredness from a long day settling into her bones. But there was a new weight in her mind. Johnny Russo, the Mafia boss, was a name she had only ever heard whispered, a figure of mystery and danger. And today, he had stepped into her life in the most unexpected way. She had been humiliated in front of a room full of strangers, and he had been the one to stand up for her. It was surreal. She shook her head, trying to focus. The phone buzzed again. It was Rosa. "Maria, I just heard the craziest thing. The bank's been buzzing all day about some guy stepping in to help you." "Who is he?" Maria hesitated before responding, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She didn't know how to explain it. "You won't believe it. He's Johnny Russo, the Mafia boss." She hit send and placed the phone on the counter, walking into the small kitchen. It wasn't much, just a tiny space with a stove and an old refrigerator. Maria opened the fridge, pulling out some leftovers from the night before. Her thoughts drifted back to Johnny. He had seemed different from the stories, his presence commanding but not threatening, his actions calm yet decisive. She wondered if it had all been a mistake. Maybe he had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But as the image of him walking into the bank, standing up for her, played in her mind, she knew that it wasn't a mistake. His intervention had felt deliberate, like he had been watching her all along, waiting for the right moment to step in. But why? Why her? She stirred the pot of leftovers absent-mindedly, her thoughts racing. Maria had always been careful. She kept her head down, worked hard, and never caused trouble. Yet somehow, she had caught the attention of one of the most powerful men in the city. She finished preparing her dinner and sat down at the small table, the weight of the meal, simple as it was, comforting in its normalcy. The phone buzzed again, snapping her from her thoughts. Rose's message came through, the words popping up on the screen. So what now? Are you going to see him again? Maria swallowed hard. The thought of seeing Johnny again was overwhelming. She had no idea what to say to him, or even how to act around him. He had saved her, yes, but she knew the kind of world he inhabited. A world of power, control, and fear. A world where people like her didn't belong. She didn't know if she could step into that world, no matter how much he had changed the course of her day. She quickly typed a response. I don't know. It feels like everything's changed, but I'm still not sure what that means for me. She set the phone down, again, pushing it aside. It was hard to explain. How could she go back to being invisible when someone like Johnny had noticed her? A part of her wanted to forget the whole thing, go back to her quiet life, doing the work she knew. But something else, something deeper, pulled her in. She couldn't stop thinking about how he had treated her, how he had made her feel seen. For the first time, Maria wasn't just a maid. She was someone worth protecting. The thought lingered in her mind as she ate, her fork moving mechanically through the food on her plate. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, reminding her that tomorrow would come, and with it, the weight of the unknown. Would she see Johnny again? Would he call her? The questions hung in the air, unanswered. After she finished her meal, Maria went to her small bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, her mind still spinning. The phone buzzed one more time. She looked at it. Rose's message. Maria, you have to be careful. I know you're not the type to get involved with men like that, but you have to watch your back. Don't let this turn into something you can't handle. Maria stared at the message for a long time. Rosa was right. Johnny Russo was dangerous. She had seen the way people reacted to him, the way they bowed to him, the way his presence commanded respect. But for some reason, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than what met the eye. A part of her was curious. What was it about her that had made him notice her? What did he want from her? She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the quiet of the apartment settling around her like a heavy blanket. Her life had always been simple. She worked hard, kept to herself, and tried not to draw attention. But now, it felt like everything was changing. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it, but she knew she couldn't go back to the way things were. The world was shifting, and for the first time, she felt like she was part of it. Maria woke up the next morning to the sound of her alarm ringing, pulling her from a restless sleep. The night had been long, filled with thoughts of Johnny Russo and what had transpired the day before. Her mind kept replaying his intervention at the bank, his voice, his presence, how calm and collected he had been while she had been on the verge of breaking down. Maria had never imagined someone like him, someone so powerful, would stand up for her. She wasn't sure what to make of it. Was it just a random act of kindness? Or was there more to it than that? Her fingers lingered on the alarm button, the weight of the day ahead already hanging over her. She needed to get ready. She had a job to do. The apartment felt quieter than usual as she moved around, getting dressed and preparing for the day. The small kitchen was still messy from the night before, but today, it didn't seem to matter. She couldn't focus on the routine of cleaning, the same tasks she had done for years. She wasn't sure why, but everything felt different now. She grabbed a quick cup of coffee and checked her phone. A new message from Rosa flashed on the screen. So, what's going on? Are you okay? Maria stared at the message for a moment, her mind swirling with the weight of everything that had happened. She hadn't told Rosa everything, only that someone had helped her at the bank. She hadn't gone into details. She wasn't sure if she could. Maria typed a quick response. I'm fine, just a lot to think about. She put her phone back in her pocket and finished getting ready, forcing herself to focus on the tasks ahead. She had to meet the family she worked for, clean the house, make dinner. Life had to continue, even if it felt like everything was changing. As she walked through the city streets on her way to work, the familiar noise of the crowded sidewalks felt different today. People brushed past her, their lives moving quickly, while Maria found herself in a daze, consumed by the events of the day before. She couldn't stop thinking about Johnny. Was he really the same person that everyone said he was? The Mafia boss who controlled everything, feared by many, yet kind to her? She had never met anyone like him. She thought about the way he had looked at her, the softness in his eyes when he asked if she was okay. It made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time, like she mattered. The thought was unsettling. What did it mean? Why had he helped her? Maria reached the house and unlocked the door, stepping inside. The smell of fresh flowers greeted her as she walked into the entryway. The family she worked for was still asleep. Maria quietly moved through the house, starting her morning routine. She had always been invisible here, just a shadow in the background. But today it was different. She moved with purpose, every step seeming heavier than usual, weighed down by thoughts she couldn't shake. She glanced at the clock. It was almost time to prepare breakfast. She set the table and started preparing the usual fare: pancakes, eggs, bacon. The smell of the food filled the house, a comfort she had grown accustomed to. But the comfort was fleeting as her mind wandered back to Johnny. What did it mean that he had stepped into her life like that? Was she being naive, thinking that this would lead to something? She had always stayed away from people like him, knowing that the world they lived in was dangerous, unpredictable. But now, it felt like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't understand. She finished making breakfast and set the plates on the table, but when the family came downstairs, the usual chatter felt distant. She went through the motions, serving them and cleaning up afterward. They didn't know what had happened, and Maria wasn't sure how she could explain it. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Maria worked, cleaned, and took care of the household as usual, but her mind kept drifting back to Johnny. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a passing moment. There was something more. That night, after finishing her shift, Maria found herself staring out the window of her small apartment, lost in thought. The city lights glittered outside, but her mind was far away, still wrestling with the question, what did it all mean? She was snapped out of her reverie by the sudden vibration of her phone. It was a message from Rosa. Maria, you're not alone in this, okay? Don't forget that. Maria smiled softly, grateful for her friend's support. She typed back a quick reply. I know. Thanks, Rosa. But even as she typed those words, part of her wondered if she was truly ready to face what was coming next. She glanced at the clock again. It was getting late, but she couldn't sleep. Not yet. There was too much on her mind. Maria stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city. The world outside seemed so far away, yet she felt like it was right there, on the verge of something new. Tomorrow would come, and with it, Johnny Russo. She didn't know what would happen next, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. Something had changed, and Maria knew she couldn't go back to being invisible anymore. Maria woke up the next morning to the sound of her alarm ringing, the quiet hum of the city outside her window, reminding her that today was another day. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, still feeling the weight of yesterday. She had not expected Johnny Russo to invade her life in such a way. Everything had changed in an instant, and she was unsure how to process it. The strange mixture of emotions, gratitude, confusion, curiosity, swirled inside her as she slowly pulled herself out of bed. She glanced at the phone on the nightstand, but there were no new messages. She hadn't heard from Rosa since last night, but somehow, Maria wasn't sure how to bring up what had happened. Was there a reason why Johnny had helped her? Or had it been a passing moment? She wasn't used to being noticed, especially by someone like him. Mafia bosses didn't just step in to defend someone like her, did they? Her mind drifted back to the moment when he had stood up for her at the bank. The way his eyes had fixed on her, the calmness in his voice, the way he had effortlessly taken control of the situation. It wasn't something that happened in Maria's world. Her world was small, quiet, and predictable. She was used to being invisible, a worker in the background, never the center of attention. And yet, here she was, waking up with the memory of that powerful man, Johnny Russo, etched in her mind. She stood and moved to the small kitchen to start her usual morning routine, but her thoughts kept returning to him. She couldn't stop wondering why he had done it, why he had stood up for her of all people. As she prepared her coffee, she found herself glancing at the clock. She was going to be late if she didn't hurry. She had to meet the family she worked for at the house, make breakfast, and begin the day. But today felt different. The weight of the previous day hung over her like a cloud, and Maria found herself lost in thought more than usual. She grabbed her things and hurried out the door, walking quickly to the subway. She passed the same street vendors, the familiar faces of the city she had seen for years. The world felt the same, but somehow it wasn't. It was as if something had shifted, and she was no longer the same person. As she rode the train, her mind wandered back to Johnny. What was his world like? What did it mean for her to be caught up in it, even for just a moment? Was it a fleeting encounter, or would this lead to something more? She had no idea. She arrived at the house and went straight to work, preparing the usual meals, cleaning, and doing everything she had always done. But today, it felt like she was on autopilot, going through the motions without truly being present. Every action seemed to have a weight she couldn't explain, like something was pulling her in a direction she wasn't ready for. By the time the afternoon rolled around, Maria had managed to finish most of her tasks. She was cleaning the living room when her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Rosa. "Maria, I know this is crazy, but I heard more rumors about Johnny Russo. He's a big deal, right? Are you okay? I'm worried about you." Maria sighed and quickly typed a reply. "I'm fine, just trying to figure things out." She placed the phone back in her pocket and continued cleaning, but her thoughts refused to stay focused. Rosa was right to be concerned. She was worried, too. She had never been involved in anything like this. She had always kept to herself, stayed out of trouble. But Johnny had seen her, really seen her, and that was something Maria had never expected. After finishing the cleaning, she made her way to the kitchen to prepare dinner. The house was quiet now, the family still away, and she had a moment to herself. It was in these quiet moments that she often found clarity, but tonight, her thoughts were all tangled. The image of Johnny lingered, and with it came a strange sense of anticipation. Was she ready for whatever came next? Could she walk away from this? Or would she be pulled further into his world? She didn't know the answers, but something inside her told her she couldn't ignore it. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Maria turned to the door, startled. Who could that be? She walked over and opened the door, surprised to find a delivery person standing outside with a small package. She signed for it and brought it inside. The box was neatly wrapped, with no return address, just her name written in bold letters. She opened it carefully and found a small note inside. The note read, "I hope this finds you well. Jr." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the initials immediately. Johnny Russo. She held the note in her hand, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. What did this mean? Why had he sent her something? She couldn't deny the swirl of emotions inside her. Excitement, confusion, even fear. Maria placed the note down carefully and stared at the box. She wasn't sure what to think. The world she knew was beginning to change, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. But deep down, she knew there was no turning back. The pull was too strong. Johnny Russo had stepped into her life, and now she had to figure out what that meant for her. Maria sat on the edge of the couch, the small note from Johnny Russo lying in her hands. The words, "I hope this finds you well, Jr." seemed to burn into her skin as she read them over and over again. She had expected a lot of things from yesterday, surprise, confusion, even fear, but she hadn't expected this. A package from Johnny Russo, a Mafia boss who had stepped into her life in the most unexpected way. Her heart raced as she thought about the implications. Why had he sent her something? Was it a gesture of goodwill, or was it the beginning of something far more complicated? She had never been one to attract attention, let alone the attention of a man like him. Yet, here she was, holding a note from the very person she had tried so hard to stay away from. The note seemed harmless, but she knew better. Nothing about Johnny Russo was harmless. He wasn't just a Mafia boss. He was a force, someone who commanded attention wherever he went. And he had just reached out to her in a way that made everything feel different. Maria set the note aside for a moment, her fingers lingering on the edges of the small box. She couldn't stop thinking about the day before, the way Johnny had walked into the bank, how he had stood up for her without hesitation. It felt like a dream. One moment, she was just another woman in the crowd, invisible to the world, and the next, she was being saved by one of the most powerful men in New York City. She still couldn't wrap her mind around it. She stood up and paced the room, her thoughts spinning. She wasn't used to people, especially someone like Johnny, taking an interest in her. Her whole life had been about staying out of the way, keeping her head down, and doing her work without making waves. But now, everything felt different. She had been noticed, and she couldn't ignore the strange pull she felt toward Johnny. It wasn't just his actions that intrigued her, it was the way he had made her feel. For the first time in a long time, Maria felt like she mattered. She glanced at the box again. What was inside? She could feel the weight of the moment, the curiosity gnawing at her. Slowly, she opened the package, the delicate sound of paper tearing filling the silence of the room. Inside, she found a beautiful leather-bound notebook, the kind that someone with great taste would choose. It was simple, elegant, and far beyond anything she would ever buy for herself. There was no note inside the box, just the notebook. But somehow that was enough. She turned the notebook over in her hands, her fingers tracing the smooth leather. What did it mean? Why would Johnny send her this? Was it a gift, or was it a message? She had no idea. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. She closed the notebook and set it aside, her mind racing again. She thought about her life before Johnny entered it, before the bank, before the gesture of protection. It had all been so simple, so predictable. She worked, she came home, and she stayed out of trouble. But now, it seemed like everything had changed. She couldn't just go back to the way things were. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a message from Rosa. "Maria, you have to tell me what happened. I know something's going on with you. You can't keep this from me." Maria read the message, her stomach twisting. She knew Rosa was just looking out for her. But how could she explain everything that had happened? How could she explain the way Johnny Russo had made her feel? She couldn't. Not yet. She quickly typed back, "I'll tell you soon. Just need to figure some things out." She put the phone down, feeling the weight of her decision. Maria knew she couldn't keep avoiding the truth, but she wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. She finished her tasks, made dinner, and tried to keep her mind off of Johnny. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that Johnny was now a part of it. She glanced at the clock and sighed. It was getting late, and she needed to get some rest. Tomorrow was another day. But as she lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Something she wasn't ready for, but couldn't avoid. Johnny Russo had changed everything, and Maria had no idea what to do next. But she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. Maria woke up early the next morning, the weight of Johnny's unexpected gesture still heavy on her mind. She tried to shake off the lingering thoughts, but it was impossible. Her world had shifted in a way she couldn't quite explain. The leather notebook, the note with the simple initials, JR, it all felt like a sign. But a sign of what? She was used to living a simple, straightforward life. Work, go home, stay out of the way. But now, she found herself caught up in something much bigger than herself. The Mafia boss, Johnny Russo, had stepped into her life and thrown everything off balance. Maria stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her hair and trying to focus on the day ahead. She had a job to do, a family to take care of, and she couldn't afford to get distracted. Still, the nagging thoughts of Johnny kept resurfacing. Why had he helped her? Was it kindness? Or was there something else? She didn't know. But what she did know was that she couldn't just ignore it. She couldn't go back to the way things were. As she dressed for the day, she tried to push aside the doubts and confusion. It wasn't easy. Maria had always prided herself on keeping a low profile, staying unnoticed, never drawing attention to herself. But now, every part of her screamed that she couldn't keep hiding. Something inside her had shifted, and she didn't know how to control it. She finished getting ready and headed out the door, the familiar routine of her walk to the subway, comforting in its predictability. But the world around her felt different. Every person she passed, every sound she heard, seemed to carry more weight. It was like she was seeing everything through a new lens, and it was unsettling. She couldn't stop thinking about Johnny. What did it mean that he had reached out to her like that? What was he expecting in return? As she rode the train, Maria's mind continued to race. She could feel the anxiety building inside her, a knot in her stomach that wouldn't loosen. It wasn't just the mystery of Johnny. It was the fear of what might come next. She had no idea how to handle any of this. She had always kept her distance from the powerful, the wealthy, the dangerous. But now, somehow, she had been drawn into their world. When Maria arrived at the house, she went straight to work, trying to focus on the tasks at hand. She made breakfast, cleaned, and did everything she had always done. But this time, everything felt different. Every dish she washed, every floor she swept, every meal she prepared. It all felt like it was happening in slow motion, like she was outside of herself, watching it all unfold. As she worked, her thoughts kept returning to Johnny. The way he had looked at her, The way his eyes had softened when he asked if she was okay, it was almost too much to process. But then, what had followed? A gift. A notebook. A note with those two simple initials, JR. What was she supposed to do with that? She couldn't just ignore it. She wasn't sure she even wanted to. But the idea of getting involved with someone like Johnny was terrifying. She had always stayed in the background, never questioning, never challenging, just doing her job and going home. But now, it seemed that her life was on the verge of something completely new. When lunch rolled around, Maria found herself thinking about Johnny again. She hadn't heard from him since the note arrived, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow watching, waiting. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Was it paranoia? Or was it something more? She couldn't be sure. She had never been good at this, at trusting people, at letting herself be seen. But Johnny hadn't just seen her. He had protected her. That made it different, didn't it? She set the table for lunch and tried to focus on the family she worked for, but her mind kept drifting back to him. She needed to talk to someone, to figure out what all of this meant. She couldn't keep carrying this weight on her own. As she cleaned the kitchen after lunch, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Rosa. Maria, are you okay? You haven't answered me all day. Maria hesitated for a moment before typing back. I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind. I'll explain soon. She put the phone down again, knowing that Rosa would be worried. But how could she explain what had happened? How could she make sense of something she didn't even understand herself? The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Maria finished her work, the hours slipping by unnoticed as her thoughts circled back to Johnny. When she finished for the day, she returned to her small apartment, her feet dragging with exhaustion. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Maria dropped her keys on the table and collapsed onto the couch. She reached for the notebook again, tracing the edges with her fingers, as if looking for some answer. She didn't know why, but she felt like she was on the edge of something. Something big. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. But then again, who could be? As she stared at the notebook, Maria felt a sudden surge of determination. She had no idea what Johnny wanted, or what he expected from her. But she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't hide from this. She couldn't go back to being invisible. Whatever was coming, she had to face it head on. Maria woke up the next morning, the weight of Johnny's gesture still pressing heavily on her mind. The leather-bound notebook was sitting on the table where she had left it last night, a constant reminder of the events that had turned her world upside down. She tried to push the thoughts aside as she started her usual morning routine. The family she worked for would be up soon, and she had to focus. But even as she made coffee and prepared breakfast, her mind kept drifting back to Johnny. Why had he sent her the notebook? Was it just a gift, or was there something more to it? The note with his initials, JR, felt like a cryptic message, like he was reaching out to her without saying the words. Maria had never been one to chase mysteries, but this one was different. It wasn't just that Johnny was a mafia boss. There was something in the way he had looked at her, something in his actions that made her feel seen for the first time in a long time. She tried to push the thoughts aside as she set the table for breakfast, but they kept coming back. The questions, the confusion, the unease. Was she overthinking it? Was she imagining things? She couldn't be sure. But what she did know was that everything had changed. As she carried the breakfast to the table, the family she worked for greeted her with their usual warm smiles. But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't fully present. She was still thinking about Johnny, still thinking about the moment at the bank when he had stepped in without hesitation. It had felt like a lifetime ago, but at the same time, it felt like it had just happened. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Rosa. Maria, you've been distant lately. What's going on? I need to know. Maria quickly typed a response, her fingers trembling slightly. Just a lot on my mind. I'll explain soon. She hit send and put the phone back in her pocket. She didn't have the words to explain it. Not yet. How could she tell Rosa that her life had just been turned upside down by a man she barely knew? She couldn't. Not yet. After breakfast, Maria cleaned the dishes, the familiar movements almost mechanical. Her thoughts kept circling back to Johnny. She needed answers. She needed to understand what had just happened. As the day wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change again. The doorbell rang in the late afternoon, breaking her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she found a small package on the doorstep, no return address. just her name written in neat letters. Her heart skipped a beat as she bent down to pick it up. She knew who it was from without even opening it. It was from Johnny. Inside the package, she found another note, this one even simpler than the last. Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. I need to talk to you. There it was again, the cryptic message. Maria stood in the doorway for a moment, the note in her hand, her mind racing. What did he want to talk about? Was he going to explain himself? Was this some kind of test? She didn't know, but she couldn't ignore it. She had to go. For reasons she couldn't quite explain, she felt like this was a turning point in her life. She couldn't keep running from whatever this was. Maria glanced at the clock. She still had time before the meeting. She couldn't sit still, so she decided to go for a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear her head. She needed to think. As she walked through the city, she tried to process the events that had unfolded over the past few days. Johnny Russo, Mafia boss, powerful, dangerous, and now, somehow, a part of her life. It didn't make sense, but at the same time, it felt like everything had been leading to this moment. She had always kept to herself, always stayed out of the way, but now, she was stepping into a world she didn't understand. The weight of it all was starting to sink in. She was nervous, anxious, but also strangely excited. This could be the beginning of something new, or it could be a mistake. She didn't know. As she made her way back home, Maria felt a strange mix of emotions. She had no idea what to expect from tomorrow's meeting with Johnny, but she knew she couldn't turn back now. She had already taken the first step into his world, and there was no going back. She entered her apartment, sat down on the couch, and stared at the note again. The words seemed to burn into her mind, making her more uncertain with each passing second. But no matter how much she tried to avoid it, she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't keep running. Tomorrow, she would face whatever Johnny had to say, and whatever came after that, she would have to figure it out. She wasn't sure what her future held, but she knew it was tied to him now, whether she liked it or not. The day of the meeting arrived faster than Maria expected. She couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and anxiety as she prepared herself for the encounter. Her nerves buzzed in her chest, but she couldn't ignore the sense of curiosity that had been building inside her ever since Johnny Russo had entered her life. She had never imagined that a mafia boss would have any reason to notice her, let alone send her a personal note. But now, here she was, on the edge of something unknown. Maria stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her outfit, her mind racing with all the possible outcomes. She tried to calm herself, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. What did Johnny want to talk about? What was the purpose of this meeting? She had no idea, but she couldn't back out now. She had already made the decision to go, and there was no turning back. She checked the time. It was almost 3 p.m. She grabbed her coat, took a deep breath, and walked out the door. The city was busy as usual, but today, it felt different. Every step she took felt heavier, as though she was walking towards something that would change her life. Maria caught the subway to the area where Johnny had asked her to meet. She got off at the station and walked the short distance to a sleek, modern building. It looked like something out of a high-end movie, the kind of place that screamed wealth and power. She stopped in front of the entrance, her heart pounding. This was it. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew that this meeting would shape her future in ways she couldn't predict. With a deep breath, Maria pushed the door open and stepped inside. The lobby was elegant and minimalist, with polished marble floors and sleek furniture. It felt like she had entered another world, a world far removed from her quiet apartment and the life she had known. She walked up to the receptionist, who greeted her with a polite smile. "May I help you?" the receptionist asked. Maria cleared her throat. "I'm here to meet Mr. Russo." The receptionist nodded, then picked up the phone to make a quick call. After a moment, she gestured for Maria to follow her. "Mr. Russo is expecting you. Please, follow me." Maria's pulse quickened as she walked behind the receptionist down a long hallway. She passed several closed doors, each one more imposing than the last. The deeper they went into the building, the more intense the feeling of power seemed to hang in the air. Finally, they reached a large, double door. The receptionist knocked lightly before opening it. "Mr. Russo, Miss Jackson is here," she said before stepping aside. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she stepped into the room. Johnny Russo was standing by the window, his back to her, staring out over the city. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, exuding the kind of authority that Maria had only ever seen in movies. His presence was magnetic, and Maria couldn't help but feel a jolt of both fear and fascination. "Miss Jackson," Johnny said, his voice smooth and calm as he turned to face her. "Thank you for coming." Maria felt a wave of nerves hit her all at once, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Thank you for inviting me," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Johnny nodded and gestured toward a chair across from his desk. "Please, have a seat." Maria sat down, her eyes not knowing where to focus. She felt out of place, as though she didn't belong in this room, in this world. Johnny studied her for a moment before speaking again. "I know. This must be a lot for you to take in, and I know you probably have questions." Maria nodded, her throat dry. "I do. I don't understand why you helped me at the bank." "Why me?" Johnny leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "Because I saw something in you," he said simply. "I don't often get involved in other people's business, but when I saw how you were treated, I knew I couldn't stand by and watch it happen." Maria blinked, surprised by his honesty. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me?" Johnny's gaze softened slightly. "You're different, Maria. You don't belong in that world, the one where people think they can treat others like dirt. You have something most people don't. Integrity." Maria's heart skipped a beat. Integrity? She had never considered herself to be anything extraordinary. She was just a maid, trying to make ends meet. But hearing him say that made her feel seen. It was a strange, almost uncomfortable feeling, but it was also comforting. Johnny stood up and walked over to the window, his back to her again as he stared out over the skyline. "I've spent my life in a world where loyalty and power rule. But there's always something more. There's always someone who gets left behind, someone who gets trampled on." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I don't want that to happen to you, Maria. You've been through enough." Maria felt her chest tighten. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Johnny smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile she had expected. It wasn't cold or menacing. It was almost warm. "I want to offer you something," he said. "A job. A new life, if you want it." Maria's mind raced. "A job?" she repeated, confused. "What kind of job?" Johnny walked over to his desk and handed her a folder. "You're smarter than you give yourself credit for," he said. "You've got the skills. You just need the right opportunity. I can give you that." Maria opened the folder, her hands shaking slightly. Inside, there was a job offer, an assistant position, one that would allow her to use her skills in a way she never imagined. The salary was more than she had ever made in a year. She stared at the paper, her mind spinning. She had never imagined a life like this. She had never imagined being offered a chance like this. But here it was, in front of her. A choice. Johnny Russo was offering her a chance to change her life, to leave the world she knew behind and step into something new. The question was, could she take it? Maria's hands shook as she stared at the folder in front of her. The offer lay there, crisp and formal, with the promise of a life she had never imagined. The salary, the position, everything about it was foreign to her. She had spent her life working hard, doing the things she was told to do, never questioning the routine that kept her alive. And now, Johnny Russo was offering her a chance to step into a completely different world. A world of power, prestige, and unknown consequences. She glanced up at him, his calm demeanor making it difficult to read his intentions. Johnny Russo, the man who had intervened on her behalf, who had made her feel seen when she had been invisible for so long, was now offering her a lifeline. But could she trust him? Could she trust herself in a world so far removed from everything she had ever known? "You don't have to decide right now," Johnny said, his voice steady, but with an undertone of something more, something that felt almost like a challenge. "But I want you to understand something. This isn't just about a job. It's about a choice. A chance to change everything." Maria swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." Johnny tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing in a way that made her feel like he was looking right through her. "You don't have to say anything. Not yet. Just think about it. Think about what you want your life to be." Maria's mind raced as she processed his words. Her whole life had been spent working for others, staying in the background, avoiding attention. But Johnny was offering her something different. A chance to step out from the shadows, to be part of something bigger than herself. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Could she really leave the life she had built, the routine that had kept her safe, For something she couldn't fully understand? The idea of it felt overwhelming. But at the same time, something deep inside her stirred. For the first time, she was being asked what she wanted, what she was capable of. Not just being told what to do, but being given a choice. She stared down at the folder again, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of the paper. The offer was real. It was right in front of her, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had the power to choose. Johnny's voice broke through her thoughts. "You're not just someone I've hired, Maria," he said, his tone softening. "I see potential in you. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. You've already got the skills. I'm just giving you the chance to put them to use." Maria felt a mixture of emotions, fear, excitement, confusion. Johnny Russo wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her a future that could be completely different from anything she had ever imagined. She looked up at him again, meeting his gaze for the first time since she had entered the room. There was no judgment in his eyes, only something she couldn't quite define, something that made her feel both small and powerful at the same time. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Maria admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is a big change." Johnny nodded slowly. "I know it's a lot, but you're stronger than you think. You've been through more than most people ever will, and you've survived. You can handle this." The words hit her like a wave, and for the first time in a long time, Maria felt a sense of clarity. She had spent her life hiding, doing the right thing, staying in the background. But now, she was being asked to step forward, to take control of her own future. The thought was overwhelming, but at the same time, it was freeing. Maria took a deep breath. "I need time to think," she said, her voice firmer now. Johnny's expression softened, and he nodded. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But I want you to know that when you're ready, this door will always be open for you." Maria stood up, the weight of the decision ahead of her settling heavily in her chest. She had never been one to take risks, never one to step outside of her comfort zone. But something had shifted. Inside her, something that told her this was the moment where everything could change. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time, she felt like she had control over her own life. As she left the room, Johnny's words echoed in her mind. "When you're ready, this door will always be open for you." She walked out of the building, her mind still racing, but this time, it wasn't with fear. It was with possibility. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, Maria felt like she had the power to choose her own path. The decision wasn't easy, and she knew it wouldn't be simple. But one thing was clear, this was her chance. Her chance to stop being invisible, to stop living in the shadows. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew she couldn't let this moment pass. It was time to take the first step into the unknown. Maria sat alone in her small apartment later that evening, the decision weighing heavily on her. She had spent the entire day thinking about the meeting with Johnny Russo and the offer he had made. Her heart raced every time she replayed the conversation in her mind. He had seen something in her that she didn't see in herself, a potential, a strength that she had never acknowledged. And now, he was offering her a chance to change everything. She had always kept her life simple. It was safe, predictable. She had worked for others, stayed in the background, and avoided making waves. But Johnny's words kept echoing in her mind. "When you're ready, this door will always be open for you." She had never been given a choice like this before. Maria stood up, pacing around her small apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, as if the decision was already being made for her. She didn't know what Johnny's world was like. She had heard the rumors, the whispers about him and his family, but she didn't know if she was ready to step into that. Could she really leave the life she knew and step into something so uncertain? She paused by the window, staring out at the city. The streets below were alive with the usual bustle, but to Maria, it all felt distant. She had spent so many years just trying to get by, staying out of sight. But now, everything was different. She could feel it in the air. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Rosa. "Maria, are you okay? You've been distant lately. What's going on?" Maria sighed and sat back down on the couch. She hadn't told Rosa about the meeting with Johnny. How could she? How could she explain it? She didn't even fully understand what was happening herself. She quickly typed a response. "I'm fine. Just thinking. I'll tell you soon." But the truth was, Maria wasn't sure if she could tell anyone. This was something that was too big to share. something that would change everything. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, and for a moment, she closed her eyes and let herself breathe. It had been years since she had felt like she had a real choice in her life. And now, Johnny Russo had handed her one. She wasn't sure what to do with it. Maria stood up again, pacing. Her mind kept returning to the same question. What did Johnny see in her? What made him think she was capable of stepping into his world? It wasn't just the job he had offered. It was the fact that he had seen her. Really seen her. He hadn't just brushed her off like everyone else. He had looked at her and recognized something. That thought was both empowering and terrifying. Maria couldn't ignore the feeling that had settled deep inside her. A feeling that perhaps, just maybe, this was her chance to step out of the shadows and into something bigger. But what if she wasn't ready? What if the price of stepping into Johnny's world was too high? The truth was, Maria didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she was making the right decision, but she knew she couldn't stay in the same place forever. She had spent too many years hiding, too many years letting life pass her by. Johnny was offering her a chance to change that. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call. Maria glanced at the screen. Rosa. She took a deep breath and answered. Hey, Rosa, Maria said, trying to keep her voice steady. Maria, what's going on? You've been quiet. I know something's up, Rosa said, her tone laced with concern. Maria hesitated. I had a meeting today. With someone. Who? Rosa asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. Maria felt a wave of hesitation, but she knew it was time to share. Johnny Russo. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Wait, the Johnny Russo? The Mafia boss. Rosa's voice was a mix of disbelief and shock. Yeah, Maria said quietly. He offered me a job. A job? Rosa repeated, clearly stunned. Maria, you can't be serious. That's dangerous. He's not someone you just work for. He's the head of a crime family. Maria took a deep breath. I know, Rosa. I know it's dangerous. But he's offering me a chance to leave all of this behind. She gestured to her small apartment, to the life she had lived for so long. I don't know what to do. Rosa was silent for a moment. Maria, I don't want to see you get hurt. I know you've been struggling, but this is a whole different level. I don't trust him. I don't trust his world. Maria nodded, even though Rosa couldn't see it. I know, she said softly. I'm just not sure what my other options are. I can keep living like this, staying invisible, or I can take a chance and see where this leads. Rosa sighed. I get it. But just be careful. Don't forget where you came from, Maria. Don't lose yourself in all of this. Maria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her friend's words. I won't forget, but I have to make this decision for myself. The conversation ended soon after, but Maria was left with more questions than answers. She knew Rosa was right to be concerned, but deep down, she also knew that this was her chance. A chance to step into a life she never thought possible. A chance to finally be seen. She took one last look at the city outside her window, the lights of the skyline flickering in the distance. Tomorrow would be the day she made her decision. Tomorrow, she would choose her future. And whatever happened, Maria knew one thing for certain. She couldn't go back to the way things were. The day arrived, the morning sun casting a soft glow through the window of Maria's apartment. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection, not quite recognizing the woman who stared back. There was a strength in her eyes now, a strength she had never noticed before. But it was mixed with uncertainty. The decision she was about to make was enormous, and for the first time in her life, Maria had the power to change the direction of her future. She had spent her entire life in the shadows, invisible to the world, doing her job and staying out of trouble. But Johnny Russo's offer had thrown everything into question. She had always believed that her place was where she was, that she had no other options. But now, that door was open. The thought of stepping through it both excited and terrified her. Maria took a deep breath and grabbed the envelope from her table, the one with the job offer. It was in her hands now, the opportunity that could completely change her life. She had spent the past few days wrestling with the idea of leaving everything behind, of entering a world that was completely unfamiliar to her. But the reality of her situation was clear. She couldn't go back to the way things were. She had tried to avoid the path Johnny was offering, but the more she thought about it, the more it became clear that there was no avoiding it. This was her moment. The phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Rosa. Maria, what have you decided? I just want to know you're okay. Maria glanced at the screen and quickly typed a response. I'm meeting him today. She paused for a moment, then added, I have to see where this goes. She hit send, set the phone down, and gathered her things. The decision was made. As she left her apartment, her heart raced. She stepped into the streets, the sounds of the city around her familiar yet distant. She felt like she was stepping into a new world, one that was both thrilling and terrifying. The subway ride felt like an eternity. Every stop made her feel more anxious, but also more alive. She didn't know what she would find at the end of this journey, but she couldn't stop herself now. When she arrived at the building where Johnny had asked her to meet, she took a deep breath before entering. The receptionist at the front desk greeted her with a polite smile and directed her to the elevator. She was taken to a high floor, the glass windows offering a view of the city below. As the elevator doors opened, Maria was greeted by a spacious, modern office. The walls were adorned with dark wood paneling and sleek furniture, giving the space an air of sophistication. Johnny Russo was standing by the window, looking out over the skyline. He turned when he heard the door open, his eyes locking onto hers. Maria, he said, his voice calm yet commanding. I'm glad you could make it. Maria nodded, taking a tentative step into the room. She could feel the tension in the air, but Johnny's presence was strangely comforting. It was as if, despite the power he exuded, there was something more to him, something human. Thank you for meeting me, Johnny continued, his gaze steady. I know this is a big decision, and I want you to feel comfortable with whatever choice you make. Maria sat down in the chair across from him, the weight of the decision still heavy on her mind. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, her voice steady. I've never been given an opportunity like this before. But it's hard for me to imagine leaving everything behind. Johnny leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. I understand, but you have to ask yourself what you want. The life you've been living, the life you're familiar with, will that make you happy in the long run? Or will you always wonder what could have been? Maria hesitated, her mind swirling with doubt. She had always played it safe, stayed in the background, never straying too far from what she knew. But Johnny's words were making her question everything. I don't know what I want, she admitted. I've never really had the chance to think about it. Johnny's expression softened, and he nodded. That's why I'm giving you the opportunity now. To think. To decide for yourself. You don't have to take this job. But I'm offering you a chance to be more than just someone who stays in the background. Maria felt a flicker of something inside her. It wasn't just fear. It was possibility. She had always played it safe, but now, she was being asked to take a leap. To step into something that could change everything. The decision wasn't easy, but she knew that it was hers to make. Johnny continued, his voice gentle but firm. I can't promise that this will be easy. The world I live in isn't easy. But if you're willing to take this chance, I'll help you. I'll guide you. You won't be alone. Maria took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. The world Johnny lived in was dangerous, yes. But it also seemed full of opportunities. Opportunities that she had never been given before. She had spent so long hiding, so long playing it safe, but now, she was being offered something more. Something that could change her life forever. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady and sure. Johnny smiled, a small, genuine smile that didn't seem as cold as it had the first time they met. Good. I knew you were ready. The moment Maria had feared was finally here. She had made the choice. The choice to step out of the shadows and into a world she didn't fully understand, but one that was offering her a chance to live a life she had only ever dreamed of. Johnny stood up and extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Maria. As she took his hand, she felt a sense of determination rise within her. This was just the beginning. She had taken the first step into a new world. And no matter what happened next, Maria knew one thing. She was ready for it. Maria stood in the sleek, high-rise building, the weight of her decision still settling deep inside her. The moment she had stepped into Johnny Russo's world, she had known it would be impossible to go back. She had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. Johnny had made it clear, this was just the beginning. As she walked through the polished hallways of his office building, Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. She had spent so long hiding in the shadows, playing it safe, and now she was stepping into a world that was unfamiliar, unknown. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped into the spacious office floor. Everything about the space screamed power: glass walls, expensive furniture, and the air of exclusivity that made her feel like an outsider, yet somehow, like she belonged. Johnny was waiting for her in his office, the same calm and confident demeanor he always had. He looked up as she entered, his eyes studying her with a steady gaze that made her feel both small and capable at the same time. "Welcome," Johnny said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "I'm glad you're here." Maria nodded, unsure of what to say. She had never been one to speak out of turn, especially not in the presence of someone like him. But today, everything felt different. She was here, in his world, and she needed to be ready. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity," Maria said softly, her voice steady, but the nerves still there. Johnny smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly. "You don't have to thank me yet. You've got a long way to go, Maria. But you're here now, and that's what matters." He stood and walked over to the large window, looking out at the city below. "I don't expect you to fit into this world right away, but I expect you to be yourself. You've already shown me what you're capable of. You just need to believe in it." Maria's heart raced. The words he spoke weren't just about the job. There was something more in them. Something that made her feel like this wasn't just a job offer. It was a challenge. "I'm ready," Maria said, more to herself than to him. Johnny turned, his eyes locking onto hers. "Good. I knew you would be." He motioned for her to follow him as he walked toward a side room. "I want you to meet some of the team. They're the ones who will help you settle in, teach you the ropes." Maria followed him, her steps measured, unsure of what exactly to expect. When they entered the room, a group of people were gathered around a table. They looked up as Johnny entered, and for a moment, Maria felt like she was under a microscope. But then Johnny introduced her. "This is Maria. She's new, but she's here because I believe she's got what it takes. Treat her like part of the team." Maria nodded at each person in the room, trying to hide the nervousness in her chest. She wasn't sure what Johnny saw in her, but she was determined to prove him right. As the meeting went on, Maria observed the others, how they moved, how they spoke, how they worked. It was a world of efficiency, precision, and, above all, respect. Johnny ran things with a quiet authority, but there was a deep loyalty in the room that Maria could feel. Everyone had a role to play, and they played it well. By the end of the meeting, Maria was exhausted, her mind racing with all the new information she had absorbed. But she also felt something else, a sense of belonging. She had made it into Johnny's world, and now, she had to prove herself. She couldn't let herself be overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. As she left the meeting room, Johnny caught her eye. "You did well today," he said, his voice low but approving. Maria smiled, grateful for his words. But there was something else in his gaze, a challenge, an unspoken understanding that this was just the beginning. The rest of the day passed in a blur as Maria familiarized herself with her new role. The tasks were challenging, but nothing she couldn't handle. As the hours ticked by, she felt a sense of confidence building inside her. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that bank a few days ago, uncertain and unsure of herself. She was changing, and she was ready for whatever came next. That evening, as she headed home, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. It wasn't just the job. It was everything that Johnny's world represented: power, control, and the opportunity to be something more. She had been offered a chance, and she was determined not to waste it. She got home late that night, the city lights casting long shadows across her small apartment. She took a deep breath and sat down at her desk, staring at the notebook Johnny had given her. It had seemed like such a simple gesture at the time, but now it felt like a symbol of everything she had yet to discover. She opened the notebook and began to write, her thoughts flowing onto the page. This was her new life, and she was ready to take it on, step by step. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Maria knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. She had a future to build, and for the first time, she felt like she had the power to do it. Tomorrow would be another challenge, another day to prove herself. But Maria was ready. And with that, she closed the notebook, the weight of her decision settling into place. This was the start of something new.